All right. So today I want to talk about instances versus the regular meshes, and I will demonstrate the performance difference, which is huge. And also on the way, I will go some blueprint, some basic blueprint looping and how to make like three-dimensional loops and yeah, that's pretty much it. Um, so it'll be quite Unreal centric today. Um, and on that, I mean, it's always a good combo to find the. It's always good to find the balance between your DCC and Unreal or the engine you're working with. But um, instances in Unreal is always like a really good choice if you want to make complex things. So I'm going to start by just creating a blueprint that clones a lot of meshes. Um, so an active blueprint. Loop 3D BP, and I will put it here, and I'm inside. All right, so what you will need is like three variables, like n for number, x, and two more, um, n, y, and n, c. And I mean, this would be a quite basic setup, but the concepts are usable in a lot of ways. And also, let's make a vector of offsets.
Just one thing that I have never quite grasped.
Yeah,
What's a vector?
it's three floats, so like three decimal numbers. So for instance, a location in 3D. So like
Okay.
XYZ coordinates, for instance, and it's in a collection because it's useful to um, because they are related in 3D. It's useful to have a vector as it's also in math or physics. It's like a direction. So I mean, it's it's used a lot, and that's why it has its own name, not just three floats.
Hmm.
Um, so you see over here is like three numbers, and I will just punch in like 100, 100, and 100, so 1 meter apart, and then I will make a loop. And if you want to make something visible in the editor without playing, you do it in the construction script. So I just do a for loop here. Um, for loop. And the difference between the for loop is looping until a certain number, and the for each loop is looping through an entire array. So if you have an array of stuff, it's very useful to do the for each loop. But in this case, we want this one. So first of all, we loop the x, actually -1, because it starts at 0. And I will actually put some meshes out here too. Um,
I'm a bit confused of what we're learning right now.
you learn some how to make lots of objects in your scene. Uh,
Okay, as cheap as possible.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Uh, see what this is. Yeah. And I think it's very useful if you're gonna work. You need to. I mean, for most cases, if you go for like technical artists, you will need to integrate your assets, and like the more you can integrate into the engine. I mean, you don't have to be a programmer, but I mean some basic cool stuff in Blueprint is very useful. Um, and just to show the difference between a regular mesh and instances, I will also create a special type of variable called an enumerator, which is essentially a list. So and I will call it mesh type. And so this one is empty from start. You can add 2, 1, and the first one will be instance, and the second one will be regular mesh. Save it. And then I will create this variable here. So mesh type. And it will be of my type mesh type. Compile it. And what this happens here is that I get this list here with 2 options in it. And I can add later, and you can use this for anything. And it makes clean programming. It could be just a number, so like if it's 0, do this, and if it's 1, do this. But I mean, this is really nice because if you switch on it like this, you get this text outputs here. So, and a good way to program in Blueprint is to make some reroute nodes and just write what you're supposed to do. So you can plan out your structure first and then go into the actual details. So create instance static mesh and add instances. And here we go. And the reason I do a reroute, a comment can't live on its own. So if you have a comment that's not on anything, it will disappear between saves. Create static mesh components. All right, so for the first one, let's make some transforms here. Make an array of transforms where our mesh is going to be. So transforms. And it would be a transform, and it would be an array, so a list of things. Compile, get it out here, and add. We'll add a new item here. So for each location here, I will have a complete transform where I will add my instance. So to make this one, oops, make and break a really good, like nodes or whatever methods you do like all the time. So a transform consists of a location, rotation, and a scale. And then in turn, this one, of course, make a vector contains an x, y, and z. So let's move this a bit. All right. So since I'm looping x here, I will just take the index and I will multiply it. Oops. With the float. And I will get.
Why is it that you are looping back here?
I'm just looping from 0 to the number of instances in x that I want. So the x number minus 1 because it starts at 0. So this one is just going to loop.
What starts at 0?
The loop starts at 0. So a loop
Okay.
is it will continue to do what you put over here until this condition is met. So like the last index is same as this part here. So for instance, if I put 10 here, it's going to loop 10 times.
Then it will stop if you put
then we'll stop, and
12.
you after it's done here, it will stop, and this completed thing will happen instead.
And then you will have 10 trees.
If you make tree here, yeah, exactly. So the offset here is 1 meter, and the index is 0, 1, and so forth. So the first one will be 1, the next one will be 100, and second one will be 200, and so forth. So I'll just input this into the X coordinate, and I will make this transform here. And to start easy, I will create a static mesh component for each one. So create static mesh, add maybe static mesh add static mesh component. All right, and here you see all like the details you have on a regular mesh. So I'll just get this. I always, same as delta time, I always promote the current index. So promote. And just call it index. So I don't have to drag a lot of wires all over the place. So here I'm just gonna get the current transform. Get reference is good. I'm not going to that, but index. That would mean if it made like if it's at number 2, I will get the number 2 here, and I will put it here. And also I will do a set mesh. Set tag because this is just an empty component. You can actually do it like this. Let's make it here. Say one node, and I'll use this wicked tree. Okay. All right. So here I have 10 of these, and I mean it's still frame rate is still good, but I will kill it shortly. So this would be like the basic loop, but I want to show you to make nested loops just to because it's very cool. And then we cut this off and move it away a bit. And instead of just doing one loop, I will do another loop too. So I'll take this one, copy it. And don't worry if you don't get it. I mean, this is, I mean, it gets a little bit complicated, but you know, you can just follow along. So now I do the number of components in Y, and now I just rename this one to index X, and I will promote this one and call it index Y. Famous reroute. And over here, I will not only do the X, but I will also do the Y. So I'll take the index Y, get it, and I will multiply that with the offset Y, and make sure there's a number there. It is, and a number, let's do 10 here too, and I will put that into the Y coordinate. So now we'll get a lot more instances, and so now I will go from the finished of this loop, go over here, and if create static mesh, I will loop again, because now I left the loop here. So I'm just making transforms inside the loop, and I go from completed, so now it's like a new single thread. So I do a new loop here, and this time I do a loop for each. Get the transforms for each loop. And now I don't have to worry about the numbers because you just loop through everything. And for each one, it will do a new transform, and I will get the transform straight from here and put it in the mesh here. All right, so let's see. And now we have 100 trees instead, or whatever it is. And actually, frame rate is still at like pretty good. So I will keep going. Save.
Is there any way that you could like make each of them rotate in different ways?
Yes, absolutely. Because you can actually make single instances and place instances with the foliage painter, like just place stuff. But if you want to animate them, like transforms, you can do that if you place like a specific instances. You can update the transform. Uh, that will I can show you an example because I think I have one. But um, now I'll just try to kill the frame rate and then show you how much you can, how far you can go with instances. Because this is still static mesh components. But now I'll try to kill it. So I will make yet another loop. For loop, copy and paste. Put here. And I will go with number C, put 10 here too. Get -1. Oh, like that. And I will promote the index to index C, like that. And now I will go and multiply that with the C component. Like this. So it's the same thing happening here. I'm only using the XYZ versions of each variable here. And now it should get a bit slower. So now I have 1,000 trees here, and now I'm starting to feel the frame rate. So now I'm at like 20, 20 to 40. But if I want to kill it for sure, I will just add some numbers here. So a lot of times with environments, I mean, complexity is a factor to make your scene look really cool. So it's, I mean, of course, very useful to know your engine well enough to be able to put like a lot of stuff in there. So here, now we're looking at a lot of trees. And I mean, Unreal is a beast, so like a few years ago, this was not even doable. But now I managed to kill the frame rate at least. So that was the point of it. And now I will show you how to make it work. So I will save everything. And I will go in here. So now let's go to this instance static mesh stuff instead. And I will start by switching the mode of this one to instance, and now they all will disappear. Loop. So what you do with an instance static mesh, that instead of adding like thousands of components, you only would add one component. So add instanced static mesh component, and transform of this one, you can just make an make an empty transform because it will be placed. It doesn't matter. You put the coordinates for each instance instead. So now you made this instance static mesh component. You promote that, and you should call it inst stat mesh comp. And now we can use this component and loop through all the transforms for each. And the reason I'm showing this is the instances are very powerful, and it took me a while to figure out how to use them. So, and I use them a lot. So for each of these ones, I will get the static mesh comp, get, and I will just use add instance. And you have the add instance world space. Like if you're doing, it's just no difference except you place the instances in world space, and this one will place them in relative space so you can move the actual actor and move the whole thing. Transform into instance transform, loop body into loop body. And also you set the mesh on this one. So if you want different types of meshes, you will need different components. I use the same one. Save it. Huh, weird. I'm actually getting worse frame rates for some reason. It's never happened before, of course. Let's see what's going on here. Let's make this one static. Strange. I will make a quick reboot. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see here. Let's see if I'm. What's going on with me here? Blueprints. QGrid. Static mesh. right. Static mesh component instance. So this is 120. And this one is 50. Um, so now it's working as it's supposed to with this mesh. It actually probably is something with the vertex shader. But anyway, so yeah, always surprises. 100 times 100, 10,000. Let's go for instance again. And then we had 50. So now we're up at 120 again with the instances. And let's go double it. And now we're up at 40,000 and still 120. And let's go 8. Still 120. 12. So 120,000 cubes. Like this. Around 100. These are the instances. I don't know actually. Probably because I had a quite high-res mesh and a vertex shader running on it, which uses world space. The other one freaked out for me and was actually faster with static mesh components. But this one with the regular material, now with instances is around 90 frames per second, and it will probably crash if I switch to static meshes. So let's go half 6 and static mesh. Yeah, now it's like 25 and we only have half the number of instances. So it has its uses. Foliage is a special instance mesh type. Um, and I mean, of course, if you want to, same here for balance, if you want to have, if you want to make like a complex looking thing like this, uh, you don't need actually a transform for each one, but I would make like a, or what I do is I make maybe a 10 times 10 uh, mesh. So the reason I have this, oh shit, 10,000 and 10 times 10, it's a large number times 6. Oh, probably crash. Um, so I could wait to see what happens, but I will just do like this. Anyway, that was actually some news for me too. But with that's the shader. I mean shaders versus transforms and CPU and all that. New level light. And the keyboard. So if you make this an 8x8 grid, and just you can of course use loops for more stuff than making grids. I mean, you could put random offsets uh, into the transforms and make variations and yeah, whatever kind of space stuff you want to make. Um, but if you make something like this, you can make an array of some kind in Unreal, and you want to make a mesh out of this one. You can make sure it's a static mesh, and then you can right click it and convert cube grid to static mesh and place it somewhere. 8x8x8 grid. Okay. And now I have this one. So now I can actually use this one as the source for my array mesh. And then of course I could increase the distance a bit. Ah, not super fast. Please, yeah, take down the numbers a bit. Yes, I mean there's a lot of ways to make complex geometry, and I mean often I find the combination between like hand working stuff and a little bit of code here and there will make a good combination. I mean if you try to make everything with code, you get stuck there and spend a lot of time just making simple ugly stuff. And if you try to make everything by hand, it will be very hard to I mean to animate it or to control it. If you make a little bit of code, you can say, yeah, I want 8,000 or what 6,000, just a click of a in a little box and a wait. But yeah, I almost want to crash this one too. Yeah. When you do, I mean, this is the math of this one is same as like unoptimized voxels. So you get when you're making cubic arrays, I mean, easily you get huge number of things. So it's save often because it's quite easy to crash your or just hang your Unreal. Um, and also one thing that I talked about was that if you make one thing that makes this really slow actually is that if you make a mesh in Unreal, it's going to make a separate material um, for each mesh. So you have to take it out into your DCC and oops, crash it. I was actually quite intrigued that this one with the tree was slower in the instance static mesh than it was in the static mesh. I have to talk with Epic about that. Yeah, so let's see if this one ended up here. yeah, so we don't want to we don't have to go into a lot of detail about this one, but anyway, if you make a mesh like this from in Unreal, again, convert to static mesh, 4 by 4 by 4 cube. This one is going to have a lot of material slots, so you will have to export it, of course, somewhere. Yes, export, and then bring it into your favorite DCC and just apply single material or whatever, few materials on it. All right. Uh, I hope this made a little sense. And I mean, like here, it's quite cool to make some transforms. It's the kind of basic principle that I want to get to you. Just with a few. Oops. Ah, now I get it. Really weird that worked. But yeah, just making a few loops and making transforms, just multiplying an offset with your index. You can put a lot of objects in your scene as an alternative to if you don't want to paint it, if it's more like a like I don't know, mechanical or something. Uh, and also just the basic one, um, regular meshes. Just create a static mesh component for each one, or the instance static mesh. Um, Make one component and then use that one and just add instances with the transform. Do you have any questions on this one?
It was a bit complicated to understand.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I'm not sure how or what I should ask to help you understand.
yeah. Uh, I mean, for it is recorded, and also it might be. I mean, you're all on different levels, but I wanted to add some like kind of um, uh, basic blueprinting too, because it's. I mean, you will need to get into it. Uh, maybe not. Maybe not all of you. Maybe you just you will all go different paths, but a lot of you at least will go into blueprints, and it's good just to get the a general idea what goes on in there, and that I mean blueprint is not all only I mean designers or like level designers. It's also artists. If you can use it, I mean any tool that's in your belt, so to speak, is good. I mean everybody has their style and their approach um, uh, to making cool scenes. Um, to make a random rotation, oops, um, I think yaw is the one. Um, you could just add the indexes together. Plus, then you get a unique number for each instance, and then you can have a random rotation. Let's do a random float from stream. Random float from stream. The reason you do random from stream is that you can make repeatable randoms, or like multiply this by 360. Ah, is that the wrong blueprint, perhaps? Nope. So this is a regular random. It would produce a new every time you ask it, it will produce a new number. So a lot of times that's not what you want. Do do do. See what's going on here. Make a seed. Promote seed. Oh. For some reason I'm not getting it right in the loop. I'm just getting one number still here. Anyway, I'm not doing any more unprepared demos, but it's good to know. All right. Do you have any other questions except for this one? Anything you want to talk about before the summer? I will be available on Discord, but I will be like AFK for a few weeks here and there. So like next week I'm away, and then I'm back for a week, and then I go away for like 10 days, and so I'm back and forth. But I will try to answer as you know, as often as I can.
I guess no one had any questions, or
Uh,
at least don't have a question right now.
yeah. Okay. I will hang around. So, but I will stop the recording here. Okay. Thank you. I hope I didn't just confuse you a lot, but feel free to ask like anything other that might be relevant to your work.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matthias.
Yes, thank you
Sorry,
very much.